All right, welcome to the AVNI Interviews. We're your hosts, Eric Bork and Mikey Taylor.
What up?
We're the co-founders of AVNI, an intelligence brand for influencers and entrepreneurs. Here on the AVNI Interviews, we interview people doing the work they want and the lifestyle they love to help other people do the same thing. Today's guest is the owner of an amazing 3D?
3D animation.
I hesitated before I said 3D. A 3D animation company called alreadybeenchewed.tv. Is that
Yes.
the right plug? All right.
Yeah.
Amazing looking animated motion graphics you may have seen from brands like G-Shock, Marvel Studios. We'll get into some of his clients. We have Barton Damer with us here today. Thanks for being with us, Barton.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, guys.
Of course. And I want to throw there something out there too. I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and one thing I notice is that sometimes people have guests on just for the audience. You're never going to see us do that with AVNI. That's not what we're about. We want to have guests on that provide value to you. And in interviewing Barton before this, he's basically taken himself from being a one-man show to having a hugely successful, I don't know if I would say hugely, but a very successful thriving business. So we also want AVNI to be a place where you're discovering amazing people, and Barton is one of those people. We're stoked to have you on, Barton. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.
Was that a really nice way of saying you don't have a big following?
Kind of. It is, but at the same time.
Are you heavy on social media?
A lot of our business is done via social media, but I don't have like hundreds of thousands or millions of subscribers. I've got like 3,000
Do you
followers.
think you need the followers now?
Do I think I need them?
Yeah, like let's say 4 years ago, the more followers you had, the more audience you have, which is still relevant now, but you can kind of be a small brand, still get out to a good amount of people through marketing, through target marketing. I imagine you do that.
Yes. Yeah, we use social media very heavily, but I would say for us, it's not been about the amount of followers, it's been the quality of followers. We use
that was kind of my point.
Yeah.
I was just giving you a hard time.
Like, I don't want to start it off on a negative about Barton. So let me just say, our focus is always on providing guests who give value to the audience. Otherwise, we don't have them on. And we always pre-interview to make sure that they're legit and that they're doing what they're saying. And we found a lot of value in what Barton's done. So that's what it is. I mean, there's value in it. So I'm excited to dive in and see how he went to being where he is today, doing all these amazing things, starting out being pretty much a one-man show. Is that accurate to say?
At the beginning, yes.
At the beginning.
Yeah, now we're a studio of 8, adding on a 9th person.
Love it.
Yeah. All right, so I don't want to say like it's if you didn't skate, like you're not as cool, but I love when people come from skating or were skaters and then created something kind of through it. So where did it start for you? I know you grew up skating, I know you still skate, but what was your first job, or what were you doing before it led to you starting ABC?
Yeah, so I'll just go quickly through some of these things, but always did kind of like the Tony Hawk Skulls, Bones Brigade, drawing that as a kid. And then in college, I was a public relations major, had to take a entry-level drawing course. I blew out my ACL skateboarding my freshman year of college, 3 weeks into my freshman year of college.
Oh, man.
And for me, the only two ways that I knew how to meet people were through skateboarding or through basketball. Those were like my two loves. So 3 weeks into my freshman year, I think I'm going to a new college to find new skate spots, and I can't do that. I have to wait till Christmas to get my ACL and my meniscus reconstructed. And during that time period, I was taking an entry-level drawing course and spent all my time up in my dorm room just drawing. And came to find out that I could paint photorealistically, I could draw photorealistically.
But you found this out in college?
Yes. Yeah. Through blowing out my ACL.
Wow.
Now I had, like I said, I had drawn like Tony Hawk Skulls when I was a kid. I like tried to do graffiti and stuff like that.
Good at it as a kid?
Yeah, but it was like cartoon stuff, like never anything like realistic or anything. So through kind of just sitting around, having the surgery, recovering from the surgery, got really good and enjoyed my art classes. And, all the devotion that I had put into skateboarding, I was now putting into pen and paper drawing for those art classes.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like, everybody was like, you need to switch your major. So I switched my major to commercial art. Fast forward, at around 27 years old, I blew out my other ACL.
Both
tore
skating?
my meniscus. Yes.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's a rough
Skating.
ride.
And so at this point, I wanted to stay involved and keep, hanging out with my friends. So I started filming and editing skate videos at 27 years old. And from there, this was like iMovie and stuff like that. But I was already kind of like doing graphic design and things like that. But this is my first introduction into video work at this point. Filming, editing the skate videos, and I found out quickly that I didn't enjoy like sifting through the video footage.
Yeah, it's the worst part. I feel you.
And
That's what Tommy does.
Yeah, I'm looking for the
Shout out
hand
Tommy
over the
Paz.
lens.
Especially back then, right?
Yeah. So, all the mini DV tapes and, all that stuff. So that was my least favorite part. But what I loved about making the skate videos was like the animated intros that I was doing for the skate videos. And so I didn't even know what motion graphics was at 27 years old, and was animating JPEGs in iMovie to create intros for my skate videos.
Nice.
So that was kind of my first look.
So you would literally just put like one JPEG and then another JPEG,
and add
that's
a
how you did
slide
it.
to it, like layers of PNGs like sliding inside of iMovie.
Yep.
Yeah. I didn't know what After Effects was, didn't know any of
Amazing.
that. I was working as a graphic designer at the time, doing print work and things like that. So I had an eye for design, but this was like the first time I was doing anything video related or motion graphics
That's
related.
amazing.
And just for people listening, I'm just going to do a real quick call out here. If you have it in front of you, go to alreadybeenchewed.tv and look at the stuff he's doing now, just to contrast kind of what you're saying. It's fascinating if you haven't already seen it. So keep going.
Cool. So, about, I would say 6 or 7 years into my career, I was bored with graphic design. Like, it just wasn't challenging. I didn't know what motion graphics was. I was starting to do the filming and editing of skate videos. And then I started seeing things like One Step Beyond come out, the audio video.
Yeah.
And the motion graphics for that were just incredible. And so I started seeing things like that. And like Andre Stringer was doing the EST videos at the time, and they had like 3D animated intros as well. And so that was kind of my first like, this is actually a thing. Like, there's motion graphics exists. So I started basically self-teaching After Effects.
How'd you do that? What
What
tools
do you mean
did you use?
teaching yourself?
Yeah. And at that time, it's like manuals. You didn't have YouTube, and you couldn't go
like a
look
For
up.
Dummies book, or
Yeah. Literally going into Barnes
that
and
what you
Nobles.
used?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anxiety, dude.
And was there any? I know.
Sounds awful.
That's AVNIintelligence.com. Was YouTube learning a thing then? Or no.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't. YouTube. When did YouTube officially launch? Like 2002
I don't know
or
the
something
year.
like that. Like.
Yeah, I don't remember the year, but I feel like the learning part of it is relatively newer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so self-taught After Effects. I actually was looking to try and get into another job, and that job, I could tell they wanted the graphic designer to know how to do more motion graphics than I was capable of. So I went out and I bought my own laptop, and I bought a copy of After Effects in order to land the job. And I just kept learning it and like sending them videos. Hey, check this out. I can do this now. Hey, check this out. And so over the course, it was like a 3-month period where they were like trying to decide who they wanted to hire. Landed that job. And then I was so scared to lose the job because I was new to motion graphics that I just kept learning so that I could keep that job.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty cool. What was the company?
I worked for several companies before I went out on my own in the Washington, D.C. area, and then ended up moving to Dallas and worked for another group called RT Media Group before I was actually launching out on my own.
And how did the launch out on your own go? When did that? Is that around that time, or how did you take that step out on your own?
So I moved to the Dallas area from the Washington, D.C. area 11 years ago. And for the first 3 years of being in Dallas, I was working at another job full time. But it was a great job in the sense that it was literally like 40 hours a week, no overtime, no weekends. It was a company that did like stock media videos. It created its own content, so it wasn't client-based work. The moment I moved down to Dallas, just via internet and things like that, I started getting inquiries to do freelance work.
Okay.
And I had never done freelance work. I was, at this point, I'm getting some of the time frames mixed up, but I was probably 8 years into my career, and I'd never even freelanced before. But I started getting these inquiries. So for 3 years straight, I would, work the normal day job and then go home, hang out with my wife and kids. I've got 3 kids. And so when you've got young kids, at least in my family, they're all in bed by like 8 o'clock, and my wife's exhausted because she's been taking care of them and doing all kinds of, things, taking care of bills for us and that kind of thing. So my wife's literally in bed by like 9:30, maybe even 9 o'clock if it's wintertime and, it's dark by 5 o'clock in the winter.
Yeah.
So my life for 3 years straight was go to work 40 hours a week, come home, play with the kids. Everybody goes to bed. I start freelancing from 10 o'clock at night till 2 in the morning, wake up. And so I was literally living off of, 4 or 5 hours of sleep for 3 years straight, figuring out, okay, this is cool. I'm filling up my extra time. I'm making more money for my family because I need it, quite frankly. We were solo income. And so freelancing over the course of that 3 years, then it was like, okay, I can fill my schedule, but can I fill it with anything that I care about? Because the last thing I want to do is just fill it with stuff that pays the bills and then maybe launch out on my own and be the owner of a company that I don't care about and the employees don't care about the work that we do. So at that stage, I was like, okay, now what can I fill it with that I enjoy? So I was able to start saying no because I already had a full-time job.
Yeah.
And then in those hours, nights and weekends, I started winning awards. Getting features in magazines. I ended up winning 2009 Digital Artist of the Year award by Computer Arts Magazine. Also, Intel gave me the award of 2009 Digital Artist of the Year.
Wow.
Can we reference any of your work back then to compare it to now? Like, how was your work back then? Would you say it's come a long way since then, or were you doing really crazy stuff back then?
It's always progressing. It's just one of those things where, as an artist, I want to be progressing. I want our studio to be progressing now that there's, 8 of us. And so that's always kind of my goal creatively is like, okay, we've already done that before. Let's try and push it and do something bigger and better this time around.
And when you were working for companies, were you doing the like explainer type videos or were you doing 3D stuff back then also?
No, not really any of that. It was a lot of After Effects. And then the job that I was at in Dallas wasn't using Cinema 4D. I was noticing that my work was looking just kind of flat. It was a lot of like Photoshop layers moving back and forth in After Effects. And so I started diving into 3D software, looking at Maya, 3D Studio Max, things like that, and just trying to figure out, okay, what's the best path for me to get my work to look like that? Like looking at some of the other things that I'd seen in the industry. And when I looked at Cinema 4D, it looked like it was the most friendly for somebody coming from a graphic design background, such as myself. The Maya and the 3D Studio Max route felt like I would actually be changing a career path and becoming like a Pixar employee, cog in the wheel type thing. And I was like, I'm not interested in that. Like,
what software
I'm a designer.
do you guys use today?
We use Cinema 4D. We use After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator, and then we also have started incorporating a program called Houdini into our workflow that allows us to do very complicated water, fire, smoke simulations, and some pretty high detailed animations and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back to you going out on your own. I want to get to that point.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to cut in. I want to know what made you want to go out on your own.
Yes. So during the course of that 3 years, it was a very odd thing for me to have a day job, but then win awards, international awards for the work I was doing nights.
You're like Batman.
And weekends. and it all happens in a digital space. So it was kind of weird for me to be like, okay, this just happened. And if I don't make a big deal out of this, it could just go away as if it never happened. But it gave me confidence because before that, I wasn't doing any big name client work whatsoever. But when I won that award, it was kind of like, okay, the industry that I love
actually thinks I'm good at this.
Thinks I'm good at this. Yeah. I must be good at this, you know? And so it was definitely like, okay, confidence, like this is happening. And then whittling it out to, okay, projects that I actually love and want to work on. And so I was able to start working with all of the KO brands back at that time.
Oh,
so,
nice.
For people who don't know, those are skateboard brands.
Yeah. So I was doing spots for DGK, Expedition, Gold Wheels, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I always wondered how they got such good graphics.
Now I know.
Well, I wasn't doing it with the board graphics. They got really cool board graphics.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was beyond stoked to be a skateboarder and now doing like motion graphics and things like that for KO brands. And then again, I always would like to just try and like maximize opportunities. And so, you know, winning that award is like, okay, that could go away and be nothing. For me, I was like, man, I'm working with DGK. That's huge. Like, I got to make sure everybody knows, like, you know, and so self-promotion is huge. So like we mentioned in the intro, social media, I'm always posting like, here's what we did. Here's what I did, you know, back in the day when it was just me. Because if you as an artist aren't willing to like shout out and be excited about your work, who's going to?
Yeah.
And so many artists are very like introverted and afraid to be like braggadocious or, you know, things like that. So to me, it was like, man, I'm working with DGK. Like I'm going to email this guy and I'm going to tell him, I'm going to hit up Nike and be like, I work with DGK. Like you want like the street kind of stuff. Like, you need that, you know?
Yeah. I always thought it was funny the first time I heard Lil Wayne say, I don't listen to music. I only listen to mine. I don't listen to any other artist, just myself. And I remember thinking like, damn, that's like a pretty bold
I do
statement.
that with our podcast. I just listen to it. It's, you want to get better.
You just want to get better.
Point.
He was like, it's a little different than you. He's like, I just want to get better. But I totally agree with you, actually. I think it's like, especially for skaters, I think it's hard for us to feel like we should brag or kind of put it out there. But dude, I totally agree. If you don't say it, man, it's going to be forgot about the next day, especially with kind of the world we're living in now.
Yeah, and I'm the type of personality that in person I'm not going to brag or put myself out there. Like
on digital, huh? Dude, you split personalities now, man.
Social media or email. It's like, what's the worst that's going to happen? They don't respond to me. You know, like I'm going to throw this huge pitch at them.
So you you took that work and you started hitting people up, going, hey, and is that how you kind of branched out and started networking?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So for you moving out onto your own, it was more, you had this 9-to-5 and then you had freelance, and then it was just like, okay, get the freelance big enough to where like I can step away from the 9-to-5. Is that how it worked for you?
Yeah. I always tell people, if you have this option, don't just jump out and think that the work is going to be there.
Very good point.
You got to create a demand for it.
Yep.
Because just because you quit your job doesn't mean all of a sudden people are going to start hiring you. So by the time I quit, I was making 75% of my income doing 15 hours of freelance a week.
75% of your income
was freelance.
Was freelance.
But like,
and you were making like a
salary.
60K. Like, was it that? It was like your standard salary was like an average salary.
Yeah. So I was trying to raise a family of 5 off of around 60K. Which doesn't work out very well.
No.
Yeah.
And so the option of freelancing was necessary, and it was a thankful thing. Like I loved staying up till 2 a.m.
Yeah.
You know, for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
I was getting better as an artist.
Break from the kids.
Getting better as an artist, and I was paying some bills, you know, at the same time.
Yeah.
So you were making more of your money freelancing.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that's actually a really good point you made, because I agree with you. Most people feel like they need to just like stop what they're doing and jump into this like new kind of dream or opportunity, whatever it is. And that can be so dangerous.
Yes.
Because there's so many things you're going to learn through that kind of start phase that if you could just like, in my eyes, dude, work your job and work at night. And just start building something so it's like a much more safer transition.
Yeah.
But I think people get lost on that.
I want to weigh in there. I'll be real quick, but I've done both. And what happens when you do the other route is you end up spending so much time chasing money to take care of everything that really, if you would have just stayed at the job and worked on the side, you probably would have had more time.
Yes. And I have two stories of friends that are close to me that have done it two different ways. So we kind of know my story in the sense that I was freelancing on the side. Another friend of mine just kind of quit cold turkey because he had a business plan in place, but didn't feel like he could execute it if he had the full-time job.
Yeah.
His scenario didn't go quite as well. He had saved up a ton of money. He ended up burning through the money, and he ended up going and getting a job 2 years later after kind of burning through that startup money.
And I do want to touch on that because I think that's so valuable. If you're going to start something, for everybody out there that's going to start something, it's going to cost more than you think, and it's going to take longer, no matter what. It always does. So be prepared for that. Like if you think it's going to cost you $200, spend $300. If you think it's going to cost, if you think it's going to take 6 months, it's going to take a year. At least anything I've ever done, it's always been kind of over budget and
yes,
it always is.
Yeah, it always is.
Yeah, and but then I did also have another friend that did the exact same thing, kind of quit cold turkey. He ended up developing a business and kept it going for 10 years.
It can absolutely,
it can happen.
This is Mikey's point in life. I always take the risk and then crash and burn. Mikey basically says, I'm going to do this because I calculated this, and this is my most successful chance of staying in the air. And look at how successful
Eric
it is.
makes me seem so smart, man.
Anyways, let's go back. Let's go back to let's go back to what you're saying. So you took the leap when you had 75% of your income because you had hustled on your spare time and created a business on your spare time, basically.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and I think it was like the kind of natural evolution, right? Yeah. It's like you have 75% of your income's coming freelance. Like, why work for somebody else?
Yeah.
So what was it like when you quit your job?
Scariest thing I've ever done.
Was
in
it
my life.
Really? Still
scary? Absolutely the scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
It reminds me of you,
because
Mikey.
I'm actually surprised by that. To tell you the truth. If I was making 75% of my income freelance, and dude, this is me not having gone through it, but what I would think is that it wouldn't be scary.
You got to keep in mind, I'm the sole breadwinner for a family of 5. So if something goes wrong, it's going to go really wrong. So that aspect is a lot of pressure and can be super scary. So that was definitely going through my mind the whole time.
So like going wrong, meaning like all the money could go away, or something going wrong, meaning you weren't going to be able to make up for that 25%?
Meaning like when I go out on my own, that's our only source of income now.
So let me throw something in here that's going to, I think, put it into perspective. You are making 75% of your income from freelance jobs, but I would venture to guess, and I'm guessing that those were not retainer jobs. Those were, you get a job 1 month, you make 80 grand. Next month, you make 5 grand.
Okay.
But it gets crazier, right? So part of the reason it's scary is because there are no long-term contracts involved. This is basically project by project based. So my last day at my job, where I have a full-time salary and health insurance, was on a Friday. I had nothing lined up for Monday, which would be my very first official day. Yeah. I just had 3 years of history proving that this could and should work. So Friday's my last day of work. Saturday, I go to a local skateboard contest in Dallas, where I'm from. Scion is the corporate sponsor of that skateboard contest, and I get introduced to the creative director that's working on the Scion account.
Is this randomly, or did you kind of put yourself in front of meeting him?
My friend wanted to connect us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
So Friday's my last day of my job. Monday, I have nothing lined up. Saturday, I go to the skateboard competition, meet the creative director. Monday, I start my first project as an ABC project, doing a Scion gig.
I'm going to throw something out here, okay? We started a podcast about a month ago. Barton sent me an outline of this interview, hit me up, and I know you guys have talked before, but like literally you're the most prepared guest I've ever, in the month and a half we've been going. Like he's on top of it. You're like, he hustles, like it's apparent. So I have a feeling there was a little bit of that going into what you were doing as well.
I knew my Instagram followers weren't high enough, so I was going to have to bring
this, dude.
I'm going to get so much heat for that. It's okay. We'll revisit it later.
Yeah, so landed my first gig ever with Scion there as full-time ABC. And so what's crazy is After that, no clue what I'm working on. After that, no clue what I'm working on. But then I get a year into it and I'm looking back and I'm like, I just killed it last month. I just killed it last month. I just killed it this last year. First year of freelance was enormous.
Yeah.
And it's that way to this day with 9 employees.
So let's talk about client acquisition. In those early days,
I'm actually going to cut you off. Real quick.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm going to forget this. Can you touch on like how you go to get a client?
That's what I just said.
Oh, that's what
you didn't really cut me off. That's what I was saying too. How'd you do it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. Shit. When something's in my mind, man, I'm not hearing anything else. It's just like, spit it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your kind of method to get clients?
Great question, Mikey.
Thank you.
There's no real method to the madness. There's a lot of different ways. And so you're always pursuing clients in a variety of ways. So I can give you one example. Street League Skateboarding was a brand new, business that Rob Dyrdek had launched. I was a super fan of just the whole idea of Street League Skateboarding. In my mind, I was like, man, pro skaters are like more talented, put their bodies on the line than like basketball players, things like that. And I want Street League to be the NBA of skateboarding. So flew out to Street League the very first year that they launched it. Flew from Dallas just to watch it in person. Blown away at how incredible it was. Well, at some point, during that season, they tweeted out that they were looking for interns at Street League Skateboarding. And I was like, well, I don't want to be an intern, but somebody's checking emails right now. So I'm going to go ahead, and I typed up a full proposal of how I do professional motion graphics for television, but I'm a skateboarder, and I can tell that you aren't using skateboarders for your graphics and motion graphics on TV. So did this whole proposal, sent it to the email address that they tweeted out. And then I started thinking, okay, well, what if I could send it directly to Rob Dyrdek? So I started guessing
emails.
Rob
Dyrdek at Mac. Rob
right.
Dyrdek at
You did that. That is, I love it.
Yes.
Did any of them work?
So started guessing, and then maybe a day or two later, I get an email back, and it simply says, "Let's do this." And I was like, okay, someone's messing with me. They can tell that I'm guessing. And trying to figure out
one of the random Dyrdek emails.
I was making up stuff. So I got a response back. It said, "Let's do this." I'm like, all right, someone's messing with me. And then next thing you know, Brian Atlas, the general manager of Street League Skateboarding, emails me back, wants to set up a phone call. And he says, "Dude, congratulations." He's like, "You have a better chance of winning the lottery than you do of getting Rob's attention, let alone him liking your work. He loves your work and told me to call you and start setting something up."
Wait, but what was this based off of? The random Dyrdek email, or you doing it through the internship?
The random Dyrdek email, yeah.
Worked.
I had gotten through to an address, and I believe they even said that they
was
didn't...
Was it like rob@streetleague.com or something like that?
I don't know.
Those are usually
it was one of the ones you guessed.
I'm not putting that on blast.
Pick a name, follow it by the company. It's probably going to work.
Yeah, but the fact that he actually opened the email and took time to look at the work and the proposal for the work. He said, "Let's do this." And it ended up leading to doing a bunch of work for Street League Skateboarding.
So awesome.
And so 7 years later, we're still working with Street League Skateboarding. And we've done motion graphics for Fantasy Factory, Ridiculousness. We've branded several TV shows for Rob on MTV, Snack Off.
So amazing.
Nice.
Not Exactly News, several, all through that one random cold email.
That's impressive because I know Rob, and it's hard to get his attention when you're sitting here talking in front of him.
Yes.
Dude, that's amazing. What a cool story.
Wow. I know, man. It almost had nothing to do with skating too.
Yeah.
So there's something you said just a second ago that kind of the I don't know if I want to say struggle, but kind of the process that you went through when you were just stepping out on your own and kind of looking back and going, holy crap, and it's still that way today.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of touched on that because I think most people that haven't gone down this path assume that the more volume you're doing or the more money you're making, the easier it is or the less stressful it is or no, you're good. You gross 20 million, that you're good.
Yeah.
But Can you kind of touch on that? Because it's kind of, in my eyes, the furthest thing from the truth.
Right. Oh, I mean, Biggie said it best: "Mo money, mo problems." Right.
There you go.
Absolutely. You never hit a point where you're like on cruise control or everything's safe or like it's all good, right?
No,
To me, it's
never.
like you always feel that like initial like, holy shit, do we got this? Do we got this in the beginning?
Yes.
Has that been the case for you going from 1, 2, 3 to now hiring your 9th employee?
Absolutely. And there's some statistic, you guys may know it, but in the first 5 years, 95% of businesses go out of business or something like that?
And then the next 5 years, it's like it's crazy.
Yeah. And then it's even scarier because a lot of businesses go out of business the year after their highest grossing year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always something that's like very nerve wracking and very kind of like.
So that's always on your mind.
Always. Yeah. Always. And we're project based. Like we, for better or worse, we don't have any like 3-year contracts.
So
or
no
like,
retainers to this day.
No. And
It's per project basis.
It's per project. And we kind of run in a niche space where we really try to create a value for our work. So obviously we can't pull off like a Banksy or a Shepherd Ferry and be like, our work is worth $2 million, you know? But at the same time, a retainer would be a terrible situation, in my opinion, because you're not getting a value for your work. You're getting like an hourly rate for your work. So we definitely want to like drive up the value of what we can create, knowing that what we offer, you're not going to be able to find at the other motion graphics studio. You know, it's going to be a unique take on what we do.
So I kind of want to dive in more to Mikey's question, which was also my question. Well, they were a little.
Here we go, dude.
Were,
Here we go.
You took a jab at me about the Instagram thing, or no, he did. We're just jabbing. So here's my question: client acquisition in the beginning versus Barton brought with him Donnie today, who does pretty much. Is he full-time client acquisition?
Yes. So Donnie, who's with us in the studio right now, has been with me for 4.5 years. And so he does sales. The first couple years he was part-time with us. He went full-time. And then he also does account representation for us as well. So like kind of helping manage accounts and things like that.
So let's kind of approach it from levels. In the beginning, that Rob Dyrdek story was amazing. How did you generally get clients? Was it mainly from networking, and was there anything outside of networking in the beginning?
Yeah. So again, back to like the social media. I landed Nike through Twitter. So there was a guy who had worked at Nike for 15 years that was just a fan of my work, really enjoyed the style that I was doing.
Did he work at Nike SB or Nike?
No, Nike like with the real budgets, Nike.
The real budgets.
Yeah, like
I mean, SB is like
the
billion,
running
so
department,
yeah,
and the
no, I know what
basketball
you're saying.
department, yeah, and the soccer department.
So how did it land through Twitter?
So he had followed me through Twitter. We had interacted through Twitter several times. And I do some speaking engagements for Cinema 4D, which is the 3D software that we use. Mm-hmm. So he kept asking me to come up and speak at the Portland Motion Graphics Group. And in my mind, it was a tough thing because it was like, well, if I leave, that's three days or so, travel there, speak one day, travel back, that I'm not doing billable hours. And, I'm the only person that has any kind of billable hours at this point. So to lose that money and go speak in Portland when I was very slammed at the time was kind of like, I don't really want to do this. And he kept saying, well, if you come, I can get you meetings with Nike. And I kept thinking to myself, well, that's cool, but if you don't get me meetings with Nike, I'm going to be pissed, But what I did at that point was I reached out to Max on Cinema 4D and I was like, hey, would you pay for my trip? I'll go promote Cinema 4D. So I got the trip covered for, so at least I wasn't like losing money by paying to go. Did the speaking engagement. He came through, got me the meetings at Nike, and we actually changed my flights so that I could stay and start working on the very first Nike project after meeting with them right then and there. And that was a very first Nike project, but I have to follow it up with, it was the most depressing thing ever, because as a designer for me, Nike was like the pinnacle, because if Nike wants you, you're good. Mm-hmm. But it ended up being like a glorified PowerPoint presentation that I was doing. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Meaning it was internal?
Internal. And it wasn't even some of the internal stuff turns out being like really cool, that you could be proud of. But this was like literally like a PowerPoint presentation. And at that time I was like, man, my one and only Nike project ever is going to be this PowerPoint presentation. And I don't even know if I can tell people I've worked with Nike as a result of this, Yeah. But I kept hounding them and updating them with work and things like that. And 8 months later, they asked me to work on the release of the Kobe 8 shoe.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
And so it was just like, for 8 months there, getting no emails back from them after working with them on a PowerPoint presentation, it was like, this sucks. Like this is going to be the pinnacle, the PowerPoint presentation for Nike.
I want to get into the bigger stuff in just a minute, but real quick, I don't want to forget about you employee wise and staffing wise when you first started. Tell us about hiring your first employee or a couple of employees and how that went.
Yeah.
You have any skaters? How many skaters work for you?
Just myself and Donnie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The rest of the guys are really, really smart.
Okay. You only have a couple skaters.
Okay, so the very first employee was a friend of mine, and he was a skateboarder. And he was working at Starbucks, and he was getting his degree in marketing. So we just kind of had an agreement, and it was like, hey, you can't get a job without experience, and you can't get experience without having a job. So why don't you come work with me? And what I'll do is I'll train you to help free me up into more billable hours, because there was just so much sending off estimates, emails, etc., that I was having to do that weren't billable hours, that I was like, okay, if I bring him on, all of a sudden I'm no longer a freelancer, I'm a studio.
Yeah.
And for me, I never wanted to be like a freelancer, because I didn't launch out and start my own business until I had been working 14 years for other people.
Got you.
And so by the time I launched out on my own, I had done everything from create logos to doing 150-page catalogs to building websites to creating full 3D animated spots for network television. So by the time I launched out on my own, my goal immediately was, this needs to be bigger than me. Because as an artist, I may be hot right now and I may be getting calls from Nike right now.
Yeah.
But 5-10 years from now, I don't want to have to reinvent myself every 3-5 years in hopes. I want to build something that can actually service clients and add value to clients, and not just hope that the phone rings because my style is getting retweeted.
And what was your agreement like with your friend that worked at Starbucks? The agreement, was it hourly? Was it?
No, I brought him on full time. Yeah.
Full time.
And we just were open and honest. And I said, hey, if it doesn't work out, you're going to be talking with agencies that I'm working with. Go get a job at the agencies and send me a bunch of work. Okay. So we were just open and honest about it. Yeah. And
so that was the first one. And then was it just the two of you for a while? And how long till you brought the next one on?
Yeah. So what I ended up doing is I built out a spare bedroom in my house because I wanted him to feel like he had like a real job.
So no office at this point yet?
No office, working out of the house. Keep expenses low,
3 kids at this time?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's hard to do, man.
This is where we get the real good look at the entrepreneur. This is my favorite part. This is the dirty. You built out a spare bedroom in your house as an office.
Yes.
Let's go. Keep going.
Yeah, and I didn't.
We're hyped.
And I built it out to be inspired by sneaker and skate shops. So if you see like photos of the original space, you would never know that it was in my house. You would think it's in like this really cool loft, like in the city.
Cool.
So built out that space so that once he tripped over toys and went upstairs,
it was cool.
We closed the door and felt like we were like in a real workspace. Then posted pictures online. And then of course, bragging, blasting it out. Like,
this guy is full of them. There's so many good ones coming from him.
And so everybody thought we had this really cool studio space and everything. And it was just a spare bedroom in my house.
I love that.
I know, man.
So do you have a strategy on hiring?
Like in what way? Like how do I choose them, or when do I decide to?
No, more like, I guess this would be for somebody who's trying to get an interview or is a boss trying to hire people, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a certain thing you look for in a person? Is it more like personality? Is it more resume?
And you also made a comment about how a lot of entrepreneurs are not entrepreneurs. They're bad employees.
Yes.
Which I don't like when people say that, because I don't want to discourage anyone from being an entrepreneur. But at the same time, that's so true. There's times when that is so true. So
I mean, people will launch out on their own because they just were a bad employee and couldn't stand having a boss, so you want to be careful about that. And that kind of speaks back to what we were discussing earlier. You want to prove that there's a service that's of value that people are hitting you up for, and that you're not just like starting your own business because you hate your boss.
Yeah.
But what were you asking? Oh, how do I hire?
Like, how do you
people?
approach
how do I
it?
choose? Yeah. So
how, if you can give any advice, maybe talk about how you hire people, and maybe for a kid that's trying to get a job, maybe things that you like that maybe they could use.
Yes. For this industry, it's always portfolio. It's funny. I don't even know or care what the college background is of my employees. Like
we hear that so
all the
much
time.
now.
I literally don't even know if they have degrees or not. Because I have a degree, but I'm completely self-taught when it comes to all 3D animation and motion graphics. Like, I didn't start it till I was 27 years old, blowing out my ACL for the second time, So the portfolio is the first thing I look at. If somebody sends me an email, I just look for the link. I skip over everything that they read, and then I click on the link. If that's good, then I go back to the email, see if like they can speak and type in complete sentences, and then from there start to have conversations with them. But personality wise, I will say this: one thing that's unique about Already Been Chewed is that with the exception of Donnie, who does come from a skateboard background, everybody on staff is an artist, which is very rare in these studios, because a lot of times you have like, maybe an executive producer, you have like a business guy, like the founder maybe.
So no business guys running the operation.
I'm the founding artist and the business guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you manage your workflow? Is that having all artists, isn't that typically the reason that most studios have a more left brain person, is to manage the creative freedom? How do you guys do that?
Yeah. Thankfully my dad is a very corporate CEO type of person, and my mom was a elementary school art teacher. So
you kind of have
I'm
both.
super thankful that I got both sides to a certain degree of the brain. Like, I'm not the most like best business person in the world, but it's stuff that I love. And at the same time, I've got the artistic side. So that's helped us quite a bit. We also have a production manager who is a senior motion graphics artist. So when he gets on the phone with clients, the clients aren't saying to like an account executive, like, well, when's Bart going to be on the phone so that we can ask him the real questions? Like, they're able to get on the phone with our head of production. He is a senior motion graphics artist. And so we keep it lean and mean in that way. There's not additional layers of unbillable hours. So even though he's managing production, he himself is doing 20, 30 hours of billable work per week. And then I'm doing billable work every single week as well. So we don't have layers of executive level people that aren't billable hours, at least not at this point in our studio. And I know many studios do operate that way. We just haven't had to do it that way.
And do you have any rules of thumb as far as you mentioned your first employee, with your second employee? How do you, and if there's not, it's okay, but do you have a strategy on when you bring on new employees based off revenue or growth?
Yes. So bringing on the third employee is and was the hardest part for me and my wife to make that decision, because we would have to move out of the house. We couldn't fit 3 people in the spare bedroom. And when you move out of the house, you're essentially saying like, this is the route I'm going and it has to work.
Did you guys downsize?
Downsize.
You moved out of your house. Oh, meaning
into
an office.
Moving
into
the
an
business.
office.
Moving
Okay,
the business
gotcha.
out of the house. Yeah.
You moved into an office, so you were
yeah,
paying rent.
and so now you have two internet bills, you have two lease payments or mortgage payments, you have two everything bills, air conditioning bills, water bills, trash bills, And so to me, that is the hardest step to take, because once you move out of the house, you have put yourself on a path that you need multiple employees. Otherwise, you should have just worked in your house with two, so it didn't make sense to move out of the house for 3 employees. I wanted to get to a point where I had at least 4 or 5. Otherwise, we should have just stayed 2 employees in the house. That was my mindset anyway. So what we did was we started keeping a log of all the work that we had to reject. And so we may have rejected that work for multiple reasons. Maybe the client hit us up. They wanted $40,000 worth of work, but they only had a $20,000 budget. We just kept like a log of that. We're like, okay, that's why we didn't take it on. Okay, but we did have to turn down like this project. It was a dream project and it had a good budget, and now we're like super bummed. So we kept like a full log of that.
You're basically measuring your demand.
Yeah, and deciding, okay, yeah, we turned that down, but we wouldn't have wanted it anyway, and then starting to evaluate, okay, in the last year, we've turned down $200,000 worth of work. We can add a third employee, basically coming up with a log like that. So we did that for a year, and then we realized, okay, we need to bring on another person so that we're not turning down the extra work.
Got you.
And so that's when it was time to like make that leap of
So
faith.
that's when you launched into having an office and hiring multiple people.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we went slow. Pretty interesting story. There was 2 of us, and I had been working with a company called Malibu Boats, and they have a sister company called Axis. And I did some smaller projects for them as a freelancer. And then there was the 2 of us. And when there was just the 2 of us, we had the opportunity to bid on taking over like their entire advertising basically for the year, which involved 2 different catalogs, a couple different like ad campaigns, things like that. So the 2 of us went up against 2 other agencies, and those agencies were 100 plus employees.
Wow.
And we were not the cheapest, and we won out.
Why?
Thankfully the marketing director at the time saw a very unique creative vision coming out of ABC and felt that only ABC was going to be able to produce that.
Nice. So, cool.
Yeah.
Love it. Let's fast forward. Let's talk about Already Been Chewed today.
Yes.
So tell us some cool projects that you guys have worked on, maybe how you got the clients. Marvel Studio. Tell us some of the cool ones. You pick.
Yeah. So right now we're working on a variety of projects. We're actually in LA because we did the branding and motion graphics for the Do Tour, which will air on NBC.
Okay.
So we did those graphics, and we came in town to check out the event. And then we're also working on Street League, the LA stop, which is the following Friday. So that's in our pipeline right now. We are currently working on a watch release for a Wonder Woman watch, a Batman watch, Flash watch, Rick and Morty, and Harry Potter. So those are in the pipeline.
And that what client is that?
So we have a client called BioWorld that we're working with on these particular releases.
Okay.
And then we have to pitch the creative to Warner Brothers, get sign off on it, and go through that whole process to make sure that the creative we're developing, they're okay with and doesn't make them uncomfortable if it's too close to the movie or things like that. So
got you.
Yeah. So those are some things that we're currently working on. We recently, this was a really fun and exciting one. We got to work on a project for Tiffany Co.
Yeah, what was it? I looked through most of your site. I didn't get to see that one. What was it?
Yeah, so they did, there's an agency out of Brooklyn called The Mission, and they were working with Tiffany on a full takeover for a release. I forget the name of the release. Do you remember offhand? Paper Flowers. And so they had ASAP Ferg come in and do a performance.
Nice.
And then they had ABC do the motion graphics. And so there was a 25-foot wide LED clock that was installed outside of the Tiffany building on 5th Avenue in Manhattan. And so we did all kinds of animations that ran 24 hours around the clock. And you could control it with hashtags via Twitter. So if you tweeted certain things, like all of a sudden, like 3D paint would, like Tiffany blue paint would come in and cover the clock.
Nice.
And so we did a variety of animations like that. But it's just really cool for us because we really like to target and work with what I would consider pop culture iconic brands.
Yeah.
And so to be able to work on a Tiffany project, I mean, it's pretty iconic.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
It
we
is.
were
Sick.
stoked.
Yeah.
And what about Major League Sports?
Yeah, so glad you mentioned that because I totally forgot. We just recently did a rebrand and graphics package for NFL Red Zone. And so that will be airing in September. Yeah.
And you've done shoes. I'm just trying to recap. You did a mask one. Just kind of run through the major leagues.
Yeah, we did a spot with Marshawn Lynch for training masks.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah, that was an interesting shoot. There were a lot of challenges to overcome on that shoot.
Let's not even get into that.
You also, not to forget, you said the Kobe 8s.
Yeah, Kobe 8s got to work on concepts for that. For Nike, we've done several global releases on various shoes, Hyperdunk, Lunar Glide, Equality Campaign, a variety of different Nike releases. We did Steph Curry shoe 4 and Steph Curry shoe 5 with Under Armour.
I hate to admit this. What shoe is he on right now?
He's Under Armour.
Yeah, he's
what?
5.
Oh.
I didn't know that either.
No idea.
To be honest, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's on his 5th shoe.
He's on his 5th shoe. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about. Okay, that's amazing. Like what you guys are doing. Looking at what you're doing is amazing. And for anybody that hasn't seen it, go to the site and just scroll through some of the clients. There was a augmented reality, or it was VR.
Yes.
Where you had a dinosaur jump out. I mean, there's some cool stuff on there. Let's dive into what Donnie does today as far as client acquisition and your guys' approach to acquiring, and also there has to be some level of maintaining your current clients and making sure that they're happy. How do you guys approach that?
Yeah, so Donnie's been working with me for about 4.5 years. He previously owned a skate shop, and so we knew each other through skateboarding. And around the time that ABC was about 3 employees, Donnie approached me. He's like, "Hey, I want to do sales for ABC." And at that moment, it was kind of like, "Man, we're slammed. Like the last thing we need right now is sales." But I kind of have a feeling we're going to need you, even though I don't fully know why. So why not? Let's do it like part-time. So he started doing sales for us.
While he was
part-time.
at the skate shop, or?
I don't remember the exact timing of that. I think the skate shop, he sold off the skate shop. And so I think he was just doing part-time at ABC at first, because I couldn't quite just bring on like a full-time salesperson, not knowing exactly how that worked. Because prior to Donnie, like all the sales was me emailing and tweeting stuff.
Yeah.
And so, so Donnie came on board, and then Donnie really helps me connect to the brands that I'm like super stoked on. So I'll be on Instagram and I'll send him stuff regularly, like 2:00 at night, and I'll be like, "Hey, we got to work with this brand," and
Donnie, make this happen. Send him a DM, dog.
Yeah. So Donnie's on LinkedIn quite a bit. He's on Facebook. He's on Reddit. He's on, the DMs, like everything.
Donnie, what's your best way for like connecting with these brands? When Barton says, "Get me in. I want to work with these guys."
Tell them the mic.
Tell us your strategy so it might help people get a hold of brands they want to work with.
Well, I think it's always experimenting and trying different ways to get in touch with people. Initially, it was just LinkedIn and reaching out to people directly. A lot of people aren't a fan of that, and you can realize that early on. So LinkedIn is still very valuable. You can kind of use it to build the company hierarchy and figure out exactly who you need to contact. So you just use that for your researching, and then you shoot out emails, it's not hard to figure out what a corporate email is. So you can figure out who you need to talk to, have value in what you're saying to them. Don't just tell them that you're great and you should use us. Actually have a reason for them to use you. And like Barton was saying, it helps to kind of go off of what you've done recently and what you've worked on. So if we work on Tiffany Co. and we do a lot of stuff with Nixon and G-Shock, it makes sense to follow up with Rolex and Tag Heuer and Movado and, kind of play to those. You can give different examples. And just really, it's a lot. You have to send out a lot of emails. You just never really stop doing it, but you always have to have value. It can't just be spam, and your follow-ups need to be targeted and have a purpose, like a new project or something like that, something entertaining.
Cool.
So
awesome.
And name drop. I mean, it's huge. Like once you get that first Nike project, or
Tell everybody you did
Tiffany and Co. project,
Still just
like
networking your way to the top.
yeah, like we're on a
Mikey's pretty good
huge
at that
push
too.
right now to try and get more like female brands. So whether we're working, with Maybelline or things like that, we want to show them like, hey, we worked with Tiffany and Co. So like, and so we can now like name drop that in the subject line. Hopefully that'll catch their attention and interest, and they'll read a little bit more. So it's the tough thing of you got to have that in your portfolio in order to get the attention of people in that industry.
So for kind of the kids, or maybe not kids, the aspiring entrepreneurs, what would be like, I don't know, your takeaway advice to somebody trying to get started?
Yeah, definitely make sure there's a demand for what you offer. I think that's wildly important. You don't want to just go quit your job and then find out 6 months later, oh, there wasn't a demand for this. So build up that demand, do it in your spare time. Don't sleep. When you are in your 20s and 30s, work hard. I am 42 now, and I can't do the long hours like I used to do. Like there's no way I could work till 2 a.m. and then wake up at 6 a.m. on a regular basis like I did for 3 years straight. So now that I realize at 42 years old, I can't do that anymore. I'm super thankful that I did it when I was younger, because it set a foundation for moving forward. So work hard when you're younger, because when you're older, it's not as easy to work quite as hard.
Yeah.
And also that you illustrated at least 2, if not 3 times throughout it, you created demand before you made the leap. And that's really smart. Create the demand and then make the leap.
And that's what we do with hiring too. So kind of back to that question is when we hire, we're not funded by anybody. It's a cash-based business.
Do you own the whole company?
Yes. Yeah. So we, in order to hire somebody, I've got to get enough demand. There has to be a demand there. We got to prove there's enough demand there. I've got to have the cash in the bank to know that when I move this person to Dallas from wherever they're moving from, like I'm not letting them go 3 months, 6 months later. Like, so building up, savings and a demand to know that when I bring this person on, it should be comfortable for at least a year or more to have this person join us.
Do you outsource at all?
We do, but I consider outsourcing like a necessary evil. So
Just what Ben said.
when we were just 2 of us out of my house, what ended up happening was I essentially became a creative director very quickly, because we were doing so much work and there was so much demand that I essentially would start the look of the project, get it approved by the client, and then start outsourcing. Okay, let's use this freelancer to like finish this project so that I can start the next project. And then once that was kicked off, and then we would like, okay, let's get another freelancer to finish this project based off of the things I initially created. And then from there, be able to juggle a bunch of projects rather than like, well, Bart's really busy for the next 4 weeks. We're going to say no to everything for the next 4 weeks, so that we didn't have to do that. We were saying yes to like everything, like everything, even if it didn't have the budget we thought it should have, we were saying yes to it. Yeah.
Amazing. So I feel like we've got a pretty good view of going from being an independent creative to how you brought on one person and started building a business. Mikey, do you have anything else you want to add in? I feel like we got a really good snapshot.
Me too. Yeah.
Barton, you want to plug your stuff real quick? We plugged your site. Just go ahead and plug whatever you want for the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in following me on Instagram, it's at Barton Damer, Barton
He needs some more.
Damer. Yeah, and if you want to follow the studio, it's at Already Been Chewed. So you can find us there on Instagram. Speaking of, one thing we haven't talked about is where the name came from.
Yeah, let's talk about
You
it.
want to talk about that?
Yeah.
So as you know, in skateboarding, the very first thing you do when you show up at a new handrail that you've never been to before is you ask the filmer, okay, what's already been done here?
Yeah.
Because it's like really taboo to put in your video part, like a crooked grind
totally.
on a
Something
rail
that's
that's already been
done,
crooked. Yeah. So we look at our clients and we ask the question, okay, what's already been done? Because we want to do something different. Otherwise, it's going to be really whack if like your competitor did the same type of campaign like last year.
I love it.
And so that's where the name comes from. But already been done's not quite as like catchy or memorable.
Yeah.
So it's like the already been chewed.
That's a pretty cool story.
That is a really
the
cool
chewed
story.
part of it too is like really pushing and motivating ourselves to be constantly learning, because as designers you can get in a rut and just regurgitate the same design tricks over and over and over, and next thing you know your style from 5 years ago hasn't changed and nobody's calling you. You know.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Bart. Well, hey, I want to say thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and revisit my point before. We don't do that lame shit of chasing audiences on
Here we
AVNI.
go.
We don't do that. We give value. Look at this. We just, if you're a creative, if you're starting your own business, look, you just got a snapshot of how it was done. That's how it's done. We don't care if Barton only has 3,000 Instagram. I only have like 5. It's all good, man.
Oh, shit.
Anyways.
Barton, how'd the interview go? It started off good and really downhill.
All right, so let's close it out there. One thing I want to throw out there is if you like this, please leave us a written review on iTunes. We love those. It helps the podcast go out more. And also, if you don't already know, you can also watch it on YouTube. We had a great response for the launch. You don't see those numbers on iTunes, but they were amazing. So thank you to everybody who subscribed. And thanks, Barton, for coming out here. He's in town for a couple days and drove all the way out here to visit us. So we appreciate it. AlreadyBeenChewed.tv. That's a wrap. Thanks, Barton.